Sometimes the most powerful moments happen in complete silence. When Princess Charlotte pressed her small hand against the cold glass of the royal car window, something extraordinary occurred that would change royal protocol forever. In those few seconds, a seasoned royal guard broke decades of tradition, opened a car door without permission, and reminded the world that behind all the ceremony and rules, there are still human hearts beating with genuine care. This is the true story of how a 7-year-old princess and a dedicated guard created a moment that touched millions of people around the world, proving that sometimes the most important rules are the unwritten ones about kindness and compassion. The morning started like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. Princess Charlotte of Wales woke up in her pink bedroom, surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals and books. The 7-year-old princess had no idea that this ordinary day would become one of the most talked-about moments in recent royal history. Outside her window, the autumn leaves were falling gently in the palace gardens, creating a carpet of gold and red that stretched as far as she could see. Charlotte had always been different from other royal children. While her older brother Prince George was more reserved and thoughtful, Charlotte was known for her bright personality and quick smile. She had a way of connecting with people that seemed natural and effortless. Her parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, had noticed this special quality in their daughter from a very young age. She would wave enthusiastically at crowds, make funny faces that made people laugh, and somehow always knew exactly what to do to make others feel happy. That morning, Charlotte was excited about the day ahead. She was going to visit a children's hospital with her mother, something she had been looking forward to for weeks. The princess had spent the previous evening carefully choosing which books to bring for the children and had even picked out a special dress that she thought would make the sick children smile. Her nanny had helped her pack a small bag with coloring books, crayons, and some of her favorite stickers to give away. As Charlotte got dressed in her carefully chosen outfit, a navy blue dress with white flowers, she could hear the familiar sounds of preparation happening throughout the palace. The royal protection officers were checking their equipment, the drivers were inspecting the cars, and the household staff were making sure everything was perfect for the day's engagements. These sounds had become the soundtrack of Charlotte's life, but she barely noticed them anymore. What she didn't know was that one of these protection officers would soon become a central figure in her story. Sergeant James Morrison had been working as a royal protection officer for 15 years. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that made him popular with both the royal family and the palace staff. James had served in the military before joining the royal protection team, and he took his job very seriously. He had protected several members of the royal family over the years, but he had developed a special fondness for the Wales children. They reminded him of his own nieces and nephews, and he always felt honored to be part of keeping them safe. James had spent the early morning reviewing the security arrangements for the hospital visit. He knew every detail of the route they would take, every entrance and exit of the building, and every person who would be present during the visit. Security for royal children was always complex, but James and his team were experts at making it look effortless. The children's safety was their top priority, but they also understood the importance of allowing the young royals to have as normal experiences as possible. The hospital they were visiting that day was St. Mary's Children's Hospital, a place that held special meaning for the royal family. The Princess of Wales had been a patron of the hospital for several years, and she had made many visits there. But this would be Charlotte's first official visit to the hospital, and everyone was excited to meet the young princess. The hospital staff had been preparing for weeks, making sure everything was perfect for the royal visit. Dr. Sarah Chun, the chief pediatrician at St. Mary's, had been working at the hospital for 10 years. She had met several members of the royal family during their visits, but she was particularly looking forward to meeting Princess Charlotte. Dr. Chin had heard wonderful things about the young princess from her colleagues who had worked with the royal family before. They had told her that Charlotte had a special way with children, and that she always seemed to know exactly what to say to make them feel better. The children at the hospital were also excited about the visit. 7-year-old Emma Thompson had been at the hospital for 3 weeks, recovering from a serious operation. She had been feeling sad and scared, but when she heard that Princess Charlotte was coming to visit, her whole face lit up. Emma had always dreamed of meeting a real princess, and she couldn't believe that it was actually going to happen. She had asked her mother to bring her favorite dress to the hospital so she could look special for the princess. 9-year-old Marcus Williams was another patient who was looking forward to the visit. Marcus had been battling leukemia for 6 months, and he had been feeling very tired and weak. But the news of the royal visit had given him something to look forward to. Marcus was fascinated by the royal family and knew all their names and ages. He had prepared a list of questions he wanted to ask Princess Charlotte, including whether she liked football and what her favorite subject was at school. As the morning progressed, the excitement at both the palace and the hospital continued to build. Charlotte had finished her breakfast and was now having her hair brushed by her nanny. She was chattering excitedly about all the children she was going to meet and all the games she wanted to play with them. Her mother watched with a smile, remembering her own first official visits as a young woman. She was proud of Charlotte's enthusiasm and knew that her daughter would bring joy to the children at the hospital. The royal car was being prepared in the palace courtyard. It was a black Range Rover with bulletproof glass and special security features. The car looked ordinary from the outside, but it was equipped with the latest technology to keep the royal family safe. The driver, Thomas Wright, had been driving for the royal family for 8 years. He knew exactly how to navigate through crowds and traffic while keeping his passengers comfortable and secure. James Morrison did one final check of his equipment before heading to the car. He had his radio, his protective gear, and his emergency medical kit. He also had a small bag of mints, which he always carried because he had learned that children sometimes felt nervous around protection officers, and offering them a mint was a good way to break the ice. James believed that being a protection officer was about more than just security. It was about making sure the royal family felt comfortable and supported in all situations. The time had come to leave for the hospital. Charlotte said goodbye to her father and her brothers, giving them each a big hug. She was wearing her navy dress with white flowers, white tights, and her favorite black shoes. Her hair was styled in loose curls, and she carried a small handbag that contained the gifts she wanted to give to the children. As she walked toward the car, she was practically bouncing with excitement. Her mother, the Princess of Wales, was dressed elegantly in a powder blue coat dress. She carried a bouquet of flowers that she would present to the hospital staff, and she had her own small bag of gifts for the children. As they approached the car, she put her hand on Charlotte's shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile. She knew that this was an important day for her daughter, and she wanted to make sure Charlotte felt confident and supported. The car door was opened by another member of the security team, and Charlotte climbed into her seat. She immediately pressed her face to the window, trying to get a better look at everything around her. The palace grounds looked different from inside the car, and she could see all the security officers taking their positions. James Morrison took his position in the front passenger seat, turning briefly to smile at Charlotte and ask if she was comfortable. As the car began to move through the palace gates, Charlotte waved at the palace staff who had gathered to see them off. She loved these moments when she could see all the people who worked so hard to take care of her family. The car moved smoothly through the London streets, with James constantly monitoring their route and communicating with the other security vehicles that were accompanying them. Charlotte watched the city pass by through her window, pointing out interesting buildings and asking her mother questions about where they were going. She had been to London many times before, but she never got tired of seeing all the different neighborhoods and learning about the people who live there. Her mother answered her questions patiently, explaining about the different areas they were passing through and the history of some of the buildings they could see. About halfway through their journey, Charlotte began to feel a little nervous. She had been so excited about the visit that she hadn't really thought about what it would be like to meet children who were sick and scared. She wondered if she would know what to say to them and whether she would be able to help them feel better. Her mother seemed to sense her nervousness and reached over to squeeze her hand reassuringly. As they got closer to the hospital, Charlotte could see crowds of people beginning to gather on the sidewalks. Some of them were holding flowers and signs, and others were taking pictures with their phones. Charlotte had seen crowds like this before during other royal visits, but it still amazed her that so many people would take time out of their day just to wave at her and her family. She made sure to wave back at everyone she could see, her bright smile lighting up her face. The hospital building came into view, a large modern structure with lots of windows and colorful decorations. Charlotte could see that there were even more people gathered outside the hospital, including many of the hospital staff who were excited to meet her. She felt her nervousness beginning to fade as she saw all the friendly faces waiting to greet them. As the car pulled up to the hospital entrance, James Morrison began his final security checks. He spoke quickly into his radio, confirming that all the security measures were in place and that it was safe for the princess and her mother to exit the car. The hospital had been thoroughly checked earlier that morning, and James was confident that everything was secure. Charlotte pressed her face against the window once more, trying to get a better look at all the people who had come see them. She could see doctors and nurses in their uniforms, hospital administrators in their best clothes, and even some of the patients who were well enough to come outside. Everyone looked so happy and excited, and Charlotte felt her own excitement returning in full force. What Charlotte didn't know was that in just a few moments, something unexpected would happen that would create one of the most memorable moments of her young life. As she sat there in the car, looking out at the crowd with wonder and anticipation, she had no idea that she was about to be part of a story that would touch the hearts of people around the world and remind everyone of the power of simple human kindness. The car came to a smooth stop outside the main entrance of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Charlotte could see the welcoming committee waiting for them, a group of doctors, nurses, and hospital administrators all dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. The hospital's chief executive, Margaret Williams, stood at the front of the group, holding a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Behind her, Charlotte could see some of the children who were well enough to come outside, their faces bright with excitement and anticipation. James Morrison immediately began his standard protocol. He spoke in his radio one final time, confirming with the other security officers that the area was secure and that everything was ready for the royal party to exit the vehicle. His trained eyes quickly scanned the crowd, the surrounding buildings, and every possible angle where any threat might come from. After 15 years of protecting the royal family, these checks had become second nature to him, as automatic as breathing. The Princess of Wales was gathering her things, checking her appearance one last time in the small mirror in her handbag, and preparing to step out of the car to meet the hospital staff. She had done hundreds of these visits over the years, and she had developed a smooth routine that allowed her to transition gracefully from the privacy of the car to the public engagement that awaited her outside. Charlotte was practically vibrating with excitement in her seat. She had her small handbag clutched tightly in her hands, and she kept looking back and forth between the crowd outside and her mother, waiting for the signal that it was time to get out of the car. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and now that it was finally here, she could hardly contain her enthusiasm. But then something unexpected happened that no one had planned for. As James Morrison reached for the door handle to open the door for the Princess of Wales, Charlotte suddenly spotted something that made her heart skip a beat. Through the crowd of adults, she caught sight of a little girl about her own age sitting in a wheelchair near the hospital entrance. The girl looked very pale and thin, and she was wearing a bright pink hat that Charlotte realized was probably covering hair that had fallen out because of her medical treatment. What struck Charlotte most was the look in the little girl's eyes. While everyone else in the crowd was smiling and waving, this little girl looked sad and tired. She was sitting slightly apart from the others, and Charlotte could see that she was straining to get a better view of the car, pressing herself forward in her wheelchair as much as she could. Without thinking about protocol or proper procedure, Charlotte pressed her small hand against the glass window of the car. She wasn't just trying to get a better look. She was trying to connect with the little girl in the wheelchair. Charlotte had an instinct that this child needed something special, something more than just a quick wave from inside a car. The little girl in the wheelchair was Emma Thompson, the 7-year-old who had been in the hospital for 3 weeks. Emma had been so excited about the royal visit, but as the moment approached, she began to feel overwhelmed by all the people and activity around her. She was still very weak from her recent surgery, and sitting in the wheelchair for so long was making her uncomfortable. When the royal car arrived, she found herself positioned behind some of the taller adults, and she was having trouble seeing anything at all. Emma had been pushing herself forward in her wheelchair, trying to get a better view, when she suddenly saw Princess Charlotte's face in the car window. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass, and Emma felt a connection that she had never experienced before. Here was another little girl, just like her, who seemed to understand exactly how she was feeling. Charlotte continued to press against the window, and she began to make gestures trying to communicate with Emma. She pointed to herself, then to Emma, and then made a heart shape with her hands. She was trying to tell Emma that she saw her and that she cared about her. Charlotte had always been good at reading people's emotions, and she could tell that Emma needed some extra attention and kindness. James Morrison noticed what was happening immediately. His job was to be aware of everything that was going on around the royal family at all times, and he could see that Princess Charlotte was trying to communicate with someone in the crowd. When he followed her gaze, he spotted Emma in her wheelchair, looking small and vulnerable among all the adults. In that moment, James faced a dilemma that wasn't covered in any of his training manuals. Royal protocol was very clear about how these events were supposed to proceed. The car doors were opened in a specific order at a specific time, and only after all security checks were complete. The royal family was supposed to exit the vehicle in a predetermined sequence, and any deviation from his protocol could potentially create security risks. But James was also a human being with a heart, and he could see what was happening between the two little girls. He could see the distress in Emma's face and the genuine concern in Princess Charlotte's. He realized that sometimes being a good protection officer meant protecting more than just physical safety. It meant protecting the emotional well-being of the people he was charged with caring for. Charlotte turned away from the window and looked directly at James Morrison. Her young face was serious and determined, and she spoke with a clarity that surprised him. "Please," she said quietly, "can we help her? She looks so sad, and I think she needs to know that someone sees her." James looked into Charlotte's eyes and saw something that reminded him why he had chosen this job in the first place. It wasn't just about following rules and procedures. It was about serving a family that genuinely cared about other people. He thought about his own nieces and nephews and what he would want someone to do for them if they were in Emma's situation. The Princess of Wales had been watching this exchange, and she too could see the little girl in the wheelchair. As a mother herself, her heart went out to Emma, and she was proud of her daughter for noticing and caring about another child who was struggling. She gave James a small nod, indicating that she supported whatever decision he was about to make. In the space of just a few seconds, James Morrison made a decision that would be talked about for years to come. He decided to break protocol. Without requesting permission from his superiors, without waiting for additional security clearance, and without following the standard procedures that had been drilled into him over 15 years of service, James quickly opened the car door for Princess Charlotte. The decision happened so fast that the other security officers didn't have time to object. James simply reached back, opened Charlotte's door, and said, "Go ahead, Your Royal Highness. But stay close to me." Charlotte didn't need to be told twice. She immediately climbed out of the car, still holding her small handbag, and began walking directly toward Emma's wheelchair. The crowd seemed to sense that something special was happening, and they naturally parted to create a path for the young princess. As Charlotte approached Emma, the entire atmosphere of the event changed. What had been a formal, carefully orchestrated royal visit suddenly became something much more personal and meaningful. The adults in the crowd stopped focusing on getting the perfect photograph and started watching this genuine moment of connection between two children. Emma couldn't believe what was happening. She had been feeling so small and forgotten, and suddenly Princess Charlotte was walking directly toward her with a big smile on her face. Emma's mother, who was standing behind the wheelchair, felt tears coming to her eyes as she watched her daughter's face light up for the first time in weeks. Charlotte walked right up to Emma's wheelchair and knelt down so they were the same eye level. She reached out and gently took Emma's hand in hers. "Hi," she said simply. "I am Charlotte. I saw you from the car, and I wanted to come say hello. How are you feeling today?" Emma was so surprised that for a moment she couldn't speak. She had imagined what it would be like to meet Princess Charlotte, but she had never imagined that the princess would come directly to her or that she would kneel down and hold her hand. Finally, Emma found her voice and whispered, "I'm Emma. I've been sick, but I'm getting better." Charlotte squeezed Emma's hand gently. "I brought some books and coloring things for everyone," she said. "Would you like to pick out something special for yourself?" Charlotte opened her small handbag and pulled out some of the gifts she had brought. She let Emma choose a coloring book with pictures of butterflies and a set of colored pencils. The conversation between the two girls continued for several minutes. Charlotte asked Emma about her favorite animals, her favorite colors, and what she liked to do when she wasn't in the hospital. Emma, who had been quiet and withdrawn for weeks, began to open up and talk enthusiastically about her pet cat and her love of drawing. James Morrison stood nearby, watching this interaction with a mixture of professional alertness and personal satisfaction. He knew that he had made the right decision, even though it meant breaking some important rules. He could see the positive effect that Charlotte's attention was having on Emma, and he could see the pride in the Princess of Wales's face as she watched her daughter's natural compassion in action. The hospital staff were also deeply moved by what they were witnessing. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had been working with children for 10 years, later said that she had never seen such an immediate and positive change in a young patient. Emma had been struggling with depression and anxiety since her surgery, but in the space of just a few minutes with Princess Charlotte, she seemed to transform back into the happy, engaged child she had been before her illness. Other children in the crowd began to gather around Charlotte and Emma, and soon the young princess was surrounded by a small group of patients who all wanted to meet her and show her their artwork or tell her about their experiences in the hospital. Charlotte handled all of this attention with remarkable poise for a 7-year-old, making sure to speak with each child individually and to give everyone a chance to share something with her. As this impromptu gathering continued, the formal, welcoming committee waited patiently in the background. They realized that something special was happening that was more important than their carefully planned schedule. Margaret Williams, the hospital's chief executive, later said that in 30 years of working in hospitals, she had never seen anything that had such a positive impact on both patients and staff. The Princess of Wales eventually joined the group of children, and she was able to see firsthand the effect that her daughter's spontaneous act of kindness was having. She spoke with Emma's mother, who told her how worried she had been about her daughter's emotional state and how grateful she was for Charlotte's attention and caring. After about 20 minutes, James Morrison gently indicated that it was time to move inside the hospital for the rest of the planned visit. Charlotte said goodbye to Emma and the other children, promising that she would come back to visit them again soon. She gave Emma an extra long hug and told her that she would think about her every day until she was all better. As they finally moved toward the hospital entrance, James Morrison realized that he would probably face some difficult questions from his supervisors about his decision to break protocol. But as he watched Princess Charlotte continue to wave at Emma and the other children, he knew that he would make the same decision again without hesitation. The formal part of the hospital visit proceeded as planned, but everyone involved knew that the most important and meaningful part of the day had already happened outside in those first few minutes. Charlotte's spontaneous act of compassion, enabled by James Morrison's willingness to break the rules when it mattered most, had created a moment that would be remembered and talked about for years to come. What none of them knew at the time was that someone in the crowd had captured the entire interaction on video, and that by the end of the day, the story of Princess Charlotte and Emma Thompson would be shared by millions of people around the world. As Princess Charlotte and her mother finally entered St. Mary's Children's Hospital, the atmosphere inside was electric with excitement. The staff had been preparing for this visit for weeks, but nothing could have prepared them for the emotional impact of what had just happened outside. Word of Charlotte's spontaneous interaction with Emma had already spread throughout the hospital, and everyone was talking about the young princess who had broken protocol to comfort a sick child. Dr. Sarah Chun greeted them in the main lobby, which had been decorated with colorful banners and artwork created by the patients. The lobby was filled with hospital staff, some parents, and children who were well enough to come downstairs for the visit. Dr. Chun had planned a carefully structured tour of the hospital, but she quickly realized that Charlotte's approach to meeting the children was going to be much more natural and unscripted than anything they could have organized. Charlotte's eyes immediately went to a group of children who were sitting in a circle near the reception desk. They were participating in an art therapy session, working on a large mural that depicted a magical forest filled with friendly animals. The mural was only half finished, but already it was clear that it was going to be something beautiful and special. Without waiting for formal introductions, Charlotte walked directly over to the children and asked if she could see their artwork. The art therapist, Maria Rodriguez, was initially flustered by this departure from the planned schedule, but she quickly recovered and began introducing Charlotte to each of the young artists. 8-year-old Jake Peterson had been working on a section of the mural that showed a family of rabbits playing in a meadow. Jake had been in the hospital for 2 months while receiving treatment for a rare genetic condition, and he had found great comfort in the art therapy sessions. When Charlotte knelt down beside him to look at his work, Jake's face lit up with pride. "These rabbits look so happy," Charlotte said, studying Jake's painting carefully. "How did you learn to paint like this?" Jake explained that Maria had been teaching him different painting techniques, and that he had never known he was good at art until he came to the hospital. Charlotte listened intently to everything Jake told her, asking thoughtful questions about his techniques and praising his creativity. She even asked if she could try painting a small flower in the corner of his section, and Jake was thrilled to teach the princess how to hold the brush properly. Meanwhile, James Morrison continued to monitor the security situation while also observing Charlotte's interactions with the children. He had been worried about the potential consequences of his earlier decision to break protocol, but as he watched Charlotte naturally connecting with patient after patient, he became more confident that he had made the right choice. The happiness and excitement on the children's faces was worth any professional risk he might face. The Princess of Wales was also watching her daughter with admiration and pride. She had always known that Charlotte had a special gift for connecting with people, but seeing her daughter in action in this setting was truly remarkable. Charlotte seemed to instinctively know what each child needed, whether it was encouragement, attention, or just someone to listen to their story. 9-year-old Sophia Martinez was working on a painting of a castle surrounded by rainbow-colored clouds. Sophia had been quiet and reserved since Charlotte arrived, partly because she was naturally shy and partly because she was self-conscious about the medical equipment she needed to carry with her everywhere she went. Charlotte noticed Sophia's hesitation and made a special effort to include her in the conversation. "I love castles," Charlotte told Sophia. "Do you know that I live in a palace? It's kind of like a castle, but not quite as fancy as the one in your painting." This comment broke the ice, and Sophia began asking Charlotte lots of questions about what it was like to live in a palace, and whether she had her own room, and whether there were secret passages. Charlotte answered all of Sophia's questions with enthusiasm, describing her bedroom, her favorite places in the palace gardens, and even admitting that she had sometimes tried to find secret passages but had never discovered any. The two girls were soon chatting like old friends, and Sophia's shyness completely disappeared. Dr. Chun had been watching this interaction with professional interest. As a pediatrician, she understood the importance of helping children maintain their emotional well-being while they were dealing with serious medical issues. She had seen many celebrity visitors over the years, but she had never seen anyone connect with young patients as naturally and effectively as Princess Charlotte was doing. After spending about 30 minutes with the art therapy group, it was time to move to the next part of the hospital tour. Charlotte was scheduled to visit the pediatric ward, where she would meet children who were too sick to come downstairs but who were eagerly waiting for her visit. As they walked through the hospital corridors, Charlotte held her mother's hand, but continued to look around with curiosity and interest. The walls of the hospital were covered with more artwork created by patients, and Charlotte stopped frequently to admire different pieces and ask questions about the artists who had made them. The pediatric ward was on the 4th floor, and as the elevator rose, Charlotte began to feel a little nervous again. She understood that the children she was about to meet were very sick, and she wanted to make sure she did the right thing to help them feel better. Her mother sensed her nervousness and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Just be yourself," the Princess of Wales whispered to Charlotte. "That's all you need to do. The children will love you just for being here and caring about them." The elevator doors opened to reveal a bright, cheerful hallway decorated with colorful murals and hanging mobiles. The pediatric ward had been designed to feel as unhospital-like as possible, with soft lighting, comfortable seating areas, and lots of natural light from large windows. Their first stop was the room of 10-year-old Marcus Williams, the boy who had been battling leukemia and who had prepared a list of questions to ask Princess Charlotte. Marcus was propped up in his hospital bed, wearing his favorite football jersey and grinning from ear to ear despite the fact that he was obviously very weak. Charlotte walked into Marcus's room and immediately noticed the football posters covering the walls and the collection of football cards scattered on his bedside table. "I see you like football," she said with a smile. "Who's your favorite team?" Marcus launched into an enthusiastic discussion of his favorite players and teams, and Charlotte listened with genuine interest, even though she admitted that she didn't know very much about football herself. She asked Marcus to explain the rules of the game to her, and he was delighted to have the chance to teach a princess about his favorite sport. "My dad says that when I get out of the hospital, we're going to go to a real football match together," Marcus told Charlotte. "Have you ever been to a football match?" Charlotte admitted that she had never been to a professional football match, but she promised Marcus that she would ask her father to take her to one so she could understand what Marcus was so excited about. This promise meant the world to Marcus, who felt like he had made a real connection with someone who would remember him and think about him even after the visit was over. Their conversation continued for about 15 minutes, covering topics ranging from Marcus's treatment and his hopes for the future to Charlotte's favorite subjects in school and what she liked to do for fun. Marcus showed Charlotte some of the books he had been reading and some drawings he had made, and Charlotte shared some of the coloring books and stickers she had brought with her. As they prepared to leave Marcus's room, he asked Charlotte if she would sign his football card collection. Charlotte was happy to do this, and she wrote a personal message telling Marcus that she thought he was very brave and that she would be thinking about him. Marcus's parents, who had been watching from the doorway, were visibly moved by their son's interaction with the princess. The next room they visited belonged to 6-year-old Amelia Foster, who had been born with a serious heart condition and had already undergone several surgeries. Amelia was much quieter than Marcus, but Charlotte could see that she was very interested in the visit. Amelia's bed was surrounded by stuffed animals, and Charlotte immediately complimented her on her collection. "I have a lot of stuffed animals, too," Charlotte told Amelia. "Which one is your favorite?" Amelia showed Charlotte a worn teddy bear named Mr. Buttons, who had been with her through all of her surgeries and hospital stays. Charlotte listened carefully as Amelia explained Mr. Buttons' history and all the adventures they had shared together. Charlotte then introduced Amelia to a small stuffed unicorn that she had brought as a gift, suggesting that Mr. Buttons might like to have a friend. The interaction between Charlotte and Amelia was gentler and quieter than her previous conversations, but it was no less meaningful. Charlotte seemed to understand instinctively that Amelia needed a different kind of attention than the other children she had met. They spent time looking at picture books together, and Charlotte even helped Amelia arrange her stuffed animals in a special formation around her bed. As they moved from room to room, Charlotte continued to adapt her approach to match the needs and personality of each child she met. With some children, she was energetic and playful. With others, she was calm and gentle. She seemed to have an endless supply of patience and genuine interest in each child's story. James Morrison watched all of these interactions with growing respect for the young princess he was protecting. He had worked with many members of the royal family over the years, and he had seen plenty of official visits and public engagements. But he had never seen anything quite like what Charlotte was doing. She wasn't just going through the motions of a royal visit. She was creating real, meaningful connections with each child she met. The hospital staff were equally impressed. Dr. Chun later told colleagues that she had worked with child psychologists and social workers who couldn't connect with young patients as effectively as Princess Charlotte was doing naturally. The nurses on the ward commented that they had never seen their patients as happy and engaged as they were during Charlotte's visit. One of the most touching moments of the ward visit happened when they met 5-year-old Oliver Kim, who had been in the hospital for several weeks and had not spoken to anyone since his arrival. Oliver had been through a traumatic experience before coming to the hospital, and the medical staff had been working hard to help him feel safe and secure. When Charlotte entered Oliver's room, she immediately noticed that he seemed scared and withdrawn. Instead of approaching him directly, she sat down on the floor near his bed and began quietly playing with some of the toys that were scattered around the room. She didn't try to force a conversation. She just played peacefully while occasionally glancing in Oliver's direction with a friendly smile. After about 10 minutes of this gentle approach, Oliver began to show interest in what Charlotte was doing. He climbed down from his bed and slowly approached her, finally sitting down next to her on the floor. They played together in comfortable silence for several more minutes before Oliver finally spoke his first words in weeks. "What's your name?" Oliver asked quietly. "I'm Charlotte," she replied simply. "What's yours?" "Oliver," he whispered. It was a small moment, but everyone in the room understood its significance. Oliver's breakthrough was a direct result of Charlotte's patient, gentle approach and her ability to create a safe space where he felt comfortable enough to begin communicating again. As the ward visit continued, word spread throughout the hospital about the remarkable interactions that were taking place. Staff members who were not scheduled to work with the royal visitors found excuses to walk by the pediatric ward, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young princess who was having such a positive impact on their patients. By the time they finished visiting all the children on the ward, Charlotte had spent nearly 2 hours in intense, focused interaction with sick children. Most adults would have been exhausted by this kind of emotional engagement, but Charlotte seemed energized by every connection she made. She asked her mother if they could stay longer, and she wanted to know when they could come back to visit again. The final stop of their hospital visit was the family lounge, where parents and siblings of patients could rest and spend time together. Charlotte met several families who were going through difficult times, and she listened to their stories with the same attention and compassion she had shown to the patients themselves. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Charlotte asked Dr. Chun if she could have the contact information for some of the children she had met. She wanted to send them letters and drawings, and she wanted to keep track of how they were doing in their treatment. This request surprised the adults, but it perfectly captured Charlotte's genuine care for the children she had met. The hospital visit had lasted much longer than originally planned, but no one complained about the extended schedule. Everyone involved understood that they had witnessed something special, something that would have a lasting impact on the children, their families, and the hospital staff. As Princess Charlotte and her mother prepared to leave St. Mary's Children's Hospital, Neither of them could have imagined the extraordinary chain of events that was already beginning to unfold. While they had been inside the hospital, creating magical moments with the patients, the outside world had been buzzing with excitement about the video footage that someone in the crowd had captured of Charlotte's spontaneous interaction with Emma Thompson. The video had been taken by Jennifer Walsh, a freelance photographer who had come to cover the royal visit for a local newspaper. Jennifer had been positioned near the hospital entrance when the royal car arrived, and she had been filming with her phone when Princess Charlotte suddenly pressed her hand against the car window. Jennifer's journalistic instincts told her that something special was happening, and she kept filming as events unfolded. The footage showed the entire sequence of events: Charlotte spotting Emma in her wheelchair, pressing against the car window, James Morrison's quick decision to open the door, and Charlotte's beautiful interaction with Emma and the other children. The video captured not just the actions, but also the emotions on everyone's faces: Charlotte's genuine concern, Emma's transformation from sadness to joy, and the surprised delight of everyone who witnessed the moment. Jennifer had immediately recognized that she had captured something extraordinary. As someone who had covered dozens of royal visits over the years, she understood that this was different from the usual carefully orchestrated public appearances. This was a genuine moment of human connection that revealed something beautiful about both the young princess and the power of spontaneous kindness. While Charlotte was still inside the hospital visiting patients, Jennifer had uploaded the video to her social media accounts with a simple caption: "Princess Charlotte sees a sick child in the crowd and asks her security to let her out of the car immediately. What happened next will restore your faith in humanity." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first hour, the video had been shared thousands of times. Within 3 hours, it had reached hundreds of thousands of views. By the time Charlotte and her mother were leaving the hospital, the video had been viewed by more than 1 million people and was being shared across every major social media platform. The comments on the video were uniformly positive and deeply emotional. Parents wrote about how Charlotte's actions had moved them to tears. People shared their own stories of children who had been in similar situations to Emma. Medical professionals praised Charlotte for understanding the emotional needs of sick children. Many people simply expressed amazement that a 7-year-old could show such wisdom and compassion. One of the most popular comments came from a woman named Sarah Mitchell, whose own daughter had spent months in a children's hospital the previous year. Sarah wrote, "This is exactly what my daughter needed when she was sick, someone to see her as a person, not just a patient." Princess Charlotte understood something that many adults don't understand. Sometimes the smallest gestures have the biggest impact. As Charlotte and her mother walked back toward their car, they could see that the crowd outside the hospital had grown significantly larger. Word of what had happened inside the hospital had spread, and more people had come hoping to catch a glimpse of the princess, who was already being called the little princess with a big heart on social media. Emma Thompson was back in the crowd, still in her wheelchair, but now surrounded by her extended family who had rushed to the hospital when they heard about her interaction with Princess Charlotte. Emma was clutching the coloring book and pencils that Charlotte had given her, and she was telling everyone who would listen about her conversation with the princess. When Charlotte emerged from the hospital, she immediately spotted Emma in the crowd and waved enthusiastically. Emma waved back with both hands, her face glowing with happiness. This second interaction was also captured on video by multiple people in the crowd, and these new videos quickly joined the original footage in going viral across the internet. As they drove back toward Kensington Palace, Charlotte chattered excitedly to her mother about all the children she had met and all the things she had learned. She asked if they could organize regular visits to the hospital, and she wanted to know if some of the children could come to visit her at the palace when they were feeling better. Her genuine enthusiasm and continuing concern for the children she had met impressed her mother deeply. The Princess of Wales had been taking mental notes throughout the day about how naturally Charlotte had handled every situation. She had seen her daughter's capacity for empathy before, but seeing it in action in such a challenging environment had been remarkable. She was already thinking about ways to nurture and channel Charlotte's natural gifts for helping others. James Morrison was also reflecting on the day's events as they drove through London. He knew that he would face questions about his decision to break protocol, but he was prepared to defend his actions. In his opinion, the security of the royal family wasn't just about protecting them from physical harm. It was also about protecting their ability to fulfill their roles as public servants and representatives of the best qualities of humanity. What James didn't know yet was that his decision was already being praised around the world. The video footage clearly showed his quick thinking and his willingness to prioritize human compassion over rigid rules. Social media users were calling him a hero and praising him for understanding the true spirit of royal service. By the time they arrived back at Buckingham Palace, the story had been picked up by major news outlets around the world. The BBC was preparing a special segment about the visit for their evening news program. CNN was planning to feature the story as their feel-good story of the day. Even international news organizations in countries that didn't normally cover British royal events were reporting on Charlotte's actions. The palace communications team was initially caught off guard by the massive media response. They were accustomed to managing carefully planned publicity campaigns around royal events. But this spontaneous moment had taken on a life of its own. After quick consultations with senior palace staff, they decided to embrace the positive coverage rather than try to control it. A brief statement was released from Kensington Palace that read, "The Princess of Wales and Princess Charlotte were deeply moved by their visit to St. Mary's Children's Hospital today. Princess Charlotte was particularly touched by her interactions with the young patients and their families. The royal family is grateful to the hospital staff for their dedication and care, and they look forward to continuing their support of the hospital's important work." The statement was simple and dignified, but it confirmed the authenticity of what people had seen in the videos. This official acknowledgement of the events only increased public interest in the story. By evening, the hashtag Princess Charlotte was trending worldwide on multiple social media platforms. People were sharing the original video along with their own stories of kindness, creating a global conversation about compassion, empathy, and the difference that small acts of caring can make in people's lives. The impact extended far beyond social media. St. Mary's Children's Hospital reported that they had received hundreds of calls from people wanting to make donations or volunteer their time. Other children's hospitals around the country reported similar increases in public interest and support. It seemed that Charlotte's actions had reminded people of the importance of caring for sick children and their families. Emma Thompson's family was overwhelmed by the positive attention their daughter was receiving. Emma had become something of a local celebrity overnight, with people stopping by the hospital to bring her gifts and cards. More importantly, her emotional state had improved dramatically since her interaction with Princess Charlotte. She was eating better, sleeping better, and engaging more actively with her medical treatment. Dr. Sarah Chun was fielding calls from medical professionals around the world who wanted to understand more about what had happened during the royal visit. Many pediatric specialists were interested in studying the psychological impact of Charlotte's interactions with the patients. The hospital was being invited to present their experiences at medical conferences and to contribute to research about the emotional well-being of hospitalized children. The story also had a significant impact on James Morrison's career. While he had been worried about facing disciplinary action for breaking protocol, he instead found himself being praised by supervisors and colleagues. The Metropolitan Police, which oversees royal protection services, issued a statement commending his quick thinking and sound judgment in a rapidly evolving situation. Several security training academies requested interviews with James to understand his decision-making process and to incorporate lessons from the incident into their training programs. His actions were being studied as an example of how good security work requires not just following rules, but also understanding the larger mission and values of the people being protected. The positive media coverage continued for several days, with new angles and follow-up stories appearing regularly. Journalists interviewed child psychologists about the importance of emotional support for sick children. They spoke with other families who had children in hospitals about what Charlotte's actions meant to them. They followed up with the hospital staff to understand the lasting impact of the visit. One particularly moving follow-up story focused on Oliver Kim, the 5-year-old who had spoken for the first time in weeks during Charlotte's visit. Oliver's breakthrough had continued after the royal visit ended. He was now communicating regularly with his medical team and had begun participating in play therapy sessions. His doctors credited Charlotte's patient, gentle approach with helping Oliver feel safe enough to begin healing emotionally as well as physically. The international response was equally remarkable. News outlets in countries around the world picked up the story, often using it as an example of positive news in a world that often seems dominated by conflict and negativity. The story was translated into dozens of languages and shared across cultural and national boundaries. In Australia, a children's hospital organized a special fundraising event inspired by Charlotte's visit. In Canada, a group of young volunteers started a program to visit hospitalized children in their own communities. In Japan, the story was used in elementary schools to teach children about empathy and kindness. The ripple effects of Charlotte's actions were extending far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. What had started as a spontaneous moment of compassion between two 7-year-old girls was inspiring people around the world to think about how they could show more kindness in their own lives. Perhaps most importantly, the story was having a lasting impact on Charlotte herself. The positive response to her actions was teaching her about the power she had to make a difference in people's lives. She was beginning to understand that being a member of the royal family wasn't just about ceremonies and formal events. It was about using her position to help others and to highlight important causes. As the week following the hospital visit progressed, Charlotte continued to think about the children she had met. She had already started working on letters and drawings to send to Emma, Marcus, Sophia, and the other patients. She was also asking her parents about ways she could continue to support the hospital and other organizations that help sick children. The story of Princess Charlotte's hospital visit had become much more than just a news story. It had become a symbol of hope, compassion, and the difference that one person can make when they choose to act with kindness. And at the center of it all was a 7-year-old girl who had simply seen another child who needed help and had responded with her whole heart. 3 months after the hospital visit that captured the world's attention, the effects of Princess Charlotte's spontaneous act of kindness continued to ripple outward in ways that no one could have predicted. What had begun as a simple moment of compassion between two children had grown into a movement that was touching lives across the globe and reshaping how people thought about empathy, childhood, and the responsibility we all have to care for one another. Emma Thompson had made a remarkable recovery, both physically and emotionally. Her surgery had been successful, and her doctors were amazed by how quickly she had bounced back from what had been a very difficult period. Emma's mother, Jennifer Thompson, was convinced that Princess Charlotte's visit had been a turning point in her daughter's healing process. Emma talks about Princess Charlotte every single day, Jennifer explained to a reporter who was following up on the original story. But more than that, she's become a different child. She's more confident, more outgoing, and she seems to understand now that she can help other children who are going through what she went through. Emma had indeed become something of an ambassador for other young patients at St. Mary's Hospital. Despite being only 7 years old, she had started visiting newly admitted children, bringing them coloring books, and sharing her own story of meeting Princess Charlotte. The hospital staff had been amazed by Emma's natural ability to comfort other children and help them feel less scared about their medical treatments. Dr. Sarah Chun had been documenting the changes in Emma and several other children who had been part of the royal visit. She was preparing a research paper about the psychological impact of positive personal interactions on pediatric patients, using the royal visit as a case study. Her preliminary findings suggested that meaningful connections with caring individuals could significantly improve children's emotional resilience and their ability to cope with medical trauma. The research was attracting international attention from medical professionals who were interested in understanding how to better support the emotional well-being of hospitalized children. Several major children's hospitals in the United States had reached out to Dr. Chun to learn about implementing similar programs in their own facilities. Marcus Williams, the football-loving 10-year-old who had been battling leukemia, had also experienced a remarkable transformation. His treatment was progressing well, and his doctors were optimistic about his prognosis. But beyond the medical improvements, Marcus had developed a new sense of purpose and hope that his family attributed largely to his interaction with Princess Charlotte. Marcus had started a blog called Goals Against Cancer, where he wrote about his treatment experience and his dreams of one day playing professional football. The blog had attracted thousands of followers, including several professional football players who had reached out to offer encouragement and support. Marcus was using his platform to raise money for cancer research and to help other children who were facing similar battles. The promise that Princess Charlotte had made to learn more about football so she could understand Marcus's passion had not been forgotten. True to her word, Charlotte had convinced her father to take her to several football matches, and she had become genuinely interested in the sport. She had even sent Marcus a signed football and a letter describing her first experience watching a live match. Oliver Kim, the 5-year-old who had spoken for the first time in weeks during Charlotte's visit, had continued to make steady progress in his emotional recovery. His breakthrough had led to significant improvements in his overall treatment, and he was now thriving in ways that had seemed impossible just a few months earlier. Oliver's story had become a powerful example of the connection between emotional healing and physical recovery. The impact of the hospital visit had extended far beyond the individual children who had met Princess Charlotte. St. Mary's Hospital had experienced an unprecedented outpouring of support from the community. Donations had increased by more than 300%, allowing the hospital to expand their child life program and hire additional staff to provide emotional support to young patients and their families. The hospital had also received thousands of volunteer applications from people who wanted to help provide comfort and companionship to hospitalized children. Many of these volunteers cited Princess Charlotte's example as their inspiration for getting involved. The hospital had to create a waiting list for potential volunteers and develop new training programs to accommodate all the people who wanted to help. The Charlotte effect, as it had come to be known, was being felt at children's hospitals around the world. Medical facilities in dozens of countries reported increased volunteerism, donations, and public awareness of pediatric healthcare needs. Professional organizations were studying the phenomenon to understand how to replicate its positive effects in other contexts. James Morrison had become something of a celebrity in his own right, though he remained characteristically modest about his role in the events. He had been promoted within the Royal Protection Service and was now involved in training other officers about the importance of understanding their role as facilitators of the royal family's public service mission, not just their physical protection. James had received letters from security professionals around the world praising his decision-making and asking for advice about how to balance protocol with human compassion. He had been invited to speak at several law enforcement conferences about the importance of situational awareness and ethical decision-making in high-pressure situations. More importantly to James, he had developed a special relationship with Princess Charlotte, who often asked about the children they had met at the hospital and who continued to seek his advice about how to help other people they encountered during royal engagements. James had become not just Charlotte's protector, but also a mentor who helped her understand how to use her position responsibly and effectively. Princess Charlotte herself had been profoundly changed by the experience and its aftermath. The 7-year-old had always been naturally empathetic, but the overwhelming positive response to her actions at the hospital had helped her understand that she had the power to make a real difference in people's lives. Charlotte had become deeply involved in planning future visits to hospitals and other charitable organizations. She worked with her mother and the palace staff to identify ways she could continue supporting sick children and their families. She had started a pen pal program with several young patients, writing letters and sending drawings on a regular basis. The princess had also begun asking thoughtful questions about the causes of childhood illness and what could be done to help prevent and treat diseases that affected children. Her interest had led to educational sessions with medical experts who explained complex topics in age-appropriate ways. Charlotte was developing an unusually sophisticated understanding of healthcare issues for someone her age. The Princess of Wales had been watching her daughter's development with a mixture of pride and amazement. She had always known that Charlotte was special, but seeing her daughter's natural leadership abilities emerge so early had been remarkable. The princess had begun incorporating more charity work and hospital visits into Charlotte's schedule, always being careful to balance these activities with normal childhood experiences. The royal family as a whole had been affected by the global response to Charlotte's actions. The positive coverage and the genuine outpouring of affection for the young princess had reinforced their understanding of the important role they could play in inspiring others and highlighting important causes. King Charles had been particularly moved by the story and had made several statements about the importance of empathy and compassion in public service. He had used Charlotte's example in speeches about the royal family's commitment to supporting vulnerable members of society, particularly children. The story had also influenced royal protocol in subtle but important ways. There was now greater flexibility in how royal visits were conducted, with more opportunities for spontaneous interactions and less rigid adherence to predetermined schedules. Palace staff had been encouraged to watch for moments when departing from the formal plan might create opportunities for meaningful connections. Educational institutions around the world had begun using the story of Princess Charlotte's hospital visit as a teaching tool. Elementary schools were discussing empathy and kindness, using Charlotte's example to help children understand how they could make a difference in other people's lives. Character education programs were incorporating the story into their curricula. Universities were studying the phenomenon from multiple academic perspectives. Sociology professors were examining how social media had amplified the impact of a single act of kindness. Psychology departments were researching the connection between positive role models and prosocial behavior in children. Communication schools were analyzing how authentic moments could create more powerful messages than carefully planned publicity campaigns. The long-term impact on charitable giving and volunteerism was still being measured, but early indicators suggested that the story had inspired a significant increase in support for children's charities worldwide. Organizations that had nothing to do with hospitals or medical care were reporting that donors were citing Princess Charlotte's example as motivation for their increased giving. Several new charitable organizations have been founded specifically in response to the hospital visit story. These groups focused on providing emotional support to hospitalized children, training volunteers to work with young patients, and advocating for improved pediatric care policies. The founders of these organizations often mentioned that they had been inspired by seeing how much difference one person could make. The story had also influenced popular culture in unexpected ways. Children's book authors had written stories inspired by Charlotte's actions. Toy manufacturers had created dolls and games that encouraged empathy and caring behavior. Television producers had developed educational programs about kindness and community service. Perhaps most significantly, the story had become part of a broader cultural conversation about the importance of raising compassionate children and creating communities that prioritize caring for vulnerable members. Parent groups were discussing how to teach their own children to notice when others needed help and to respond with kindness rather than indifference. As the first anniversary of the hospital visit approached, St. Mary's Hospital was planning a special celebration to honor the lasting impact of that day. They were organizing a reunion for the children who had met Princess Charlotte, many of whom had completed their treatments and were doing well. The hospital was also planning to unveil a new family support center that had been funded largely by donations that came in response to Charlotte's visit. Emma Thompson, now 8 years old and completely recovered from her surgery, had been asked to speak at the anniversary event. She had been working with her mother to prepare remarks about what Princess Charlotte's kindness had meant to her and how it had inspired her to help other children who were facing difficult times. Marcus Williams was planning to attend the event as well, arriving directly from a football tournament where he was playing for his local youth team. His cancer was in remission, and he was living the active, sports-filled life he had dreamed about during his months of treatment. He credited his recovery not just to excellent medical care, but also to the hope and inspiration he had gained from meeting Princess Charlotte. Oliver Kim's family had also been invited to the anniversary celebration. Oliver was now a confident, talkative 6-year-old who showed no signs of the trauma that had silenced him during his hospital stay. His parents often said that Princess Charlotte's gentle approach had been the key to helping their son feel safe enough to begin healing emotionally. The anniversary event was being planned not just as a celebration, but also as a launching point for new initiatives inspired by Charlotte's example. The hospital was announcing partnerships with schools to bring patient volunteers into classrooms to teach empathy and resilience. They were also starting a research program to study how positive interactions could be systematically incorporated into pediatric care. Princess Charlotte was expected to attend the anniversary event, though palace officials were being careful not to create pressure or expectations that might overshadow the original spontaneity of her actions. The goal was to celebrate what had been accomplished and to inspire continued efforts to support sick children and their families. As she prepared for the anniversary visit, Charlotte reflected on how much her life had changed since that day, when she had simply seen another child who needed help and had asked to get out of her car to provide that help. She was still the same caring, energetic 7-year-old she had always been, but she now understood that her position gave her unique opportunities to make a difference in people's lives. The story of Princess Charlotte's hospital visit had become more than just a heartwarming news story. It had become a reminder of the power of individual action and the importance of responding to others with compassion and care. In a world that often seemed divided and challenging, a 7-year-old princess had shown that simple acts of kindness could create ripple effects that touched lives around the globe. The legacy of that moment, when Charlotte pressed her hand against the car window and asked to help a sick child, would continue to inspire people for years to come. It served as proof that age doesn't matter when it comes to making a difference, that protocol should never supersede compassion, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply notice when someone else needs help and respond with your whole heart. In the end, the story was about much more than a royal visit or a viral video. It was about the fundamental human capacity for empathy and the extraordinary things that can happen when that empathy is allowed to guide our actions. Princess Charlotte had reminded the world that we all have the power to change lives through kindness, and that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact.